Hello, everybody. Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest, here with another little pre-take in front of our podcast because, once again, Ryker and I have had bad luck in terms of timing when it comes to recording these podcasts, but Ryker and I made this video about Marc Gasol leaving the Raptors based off a report from a guy named Sergei Karamova from Spain, who basically reported that Marc Gasol had signed with Barcelona for this upcoming season, obviously making him leave the Toronto Raptors. But unfortunately, as we were recording the podcast, this sort of got invalidated by a lot of the Raptors' main guys, despite the fact that this report had already blown up around tweet accounts like Legion Hoops, different news sites. So as we were recording, Josh Bloomberg came out and said this actually isn't official. I think a few other guys did as well, but there's still the presumption, as you can see from the tweet here, that people still expect Marc Gasol to sort of sign with Barcelona once he's officially eligible to, but obviously he's still a member of the Toronto Raptors till the season is over, so this can't legally be official till the season's done. So we're going to still put this podcast out under the assumption Marc Gasol is going to play in Barcelona, but things may change from then, so we'll obviously make a second video sort of denouncing this one if that ends up being the case. But hope you guys enjoyed the video. Just wanted to sort of clarify that. I know there's some weird stuff going around. People are a bit confused about what's actually happened, so wanted to clarify that. And before we swing it in, want to appreciate all you guys that subscribed after the last sort of video. Had a lot of subscribers sort of fall in after that Depot video. So yeah, you guys are the best. Once again, we're shooting for 20K, so hope to see everyone that listens to the video subscribe. And yeah, let's just swing into the video. Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest, reacting to some Toronto Raptors news, Ryker. There was rumors floating around about Marc Gasol potentially going to the Clippers, potentially leaving for Europe, but it's official now. Marc Gasol has signed with Barcelona in Europe, officially leaving the Toronto Raptors. Obviously, he was our starting center this year, struggled in the playoffs, but overall had a tremendous run with the Toronto Raptors, was an integral part to winning an NBA championship, and I guess before we sort of break down what this means for the Toronto Raptors team, we got to give some love to Marc Gasol because he truly was a massive piece to winning that NBA title last season, Ryker.
Absolutely, Ben. But first, as Vince Vaughn would say in some movie, I don't know, I think it might be Couples Retreat. It's not Barcelona, it's Barcelona. But you know what, Ben? Marc Gasol, this is what happened, basically. We'll break down his contract. We'll break down what has to happen now for the Toronto Raptors next season at that center position now. But this is basically what happened. We turned Jonas Valanciunas mid-season into Marc Gasol, who, despite his shortcomings this season, and especially in this year's playoffs, was an assist guy. He was a floor general type guy. The ball at the center position was able to flow through him, Marc Gasol, to make plays and to be slightly more productive on the defensive end as well. So you're able to actually elevate your offensive and your defensive performance at the center position, resulting in, obviously Kawhi came in as well, but resulting in a championship, Ben. So credit where credit is due. This guy, he came in, and for that season, the 2018-2019 second half of the season with Marc Gasol was tremendous.
Yeah, he was really just the game changer for the Toronto Raptors, I want to put it. Obviously, Kawhi put us over the top and all that sort of stuff, but even at the start of the year, Jonas Valanciunas, fan favorite amongst Raptors guys. He was one of the longest tenure Raptors on that roster at that point, but for all he did on the offensive end in terms of scoring, defensively, particularly in the pick and roll, it really hurt the Raptors, and Marc Gasol just came in and completely changed the tone defensively when he was out there as a big man center. And as you brought up, the offense just even looked more fluid with Marc Gasol out there. Obviously, JV learned how to pick up his passing a little bit. We talked about that on a lot of pods last year. But Marc Gasol, outside of Jokic, is arguably probably the best passing big man in the league. You can maybe make an argument for Bam or these guys, but Marc Gasol's IQ in terms of throwing those back cut passes, swing it when it needs to be swung. Obviously, we hoped he'd shoot a little bit more, but his playmaking at the center position just made the offense even that more just effective, and the defense he brought I don't think we win the championship without Marc Gasol, Ryker.
No, and we've broken this down a ton to say it's much less likely to win a championship, especially considering that the Raptors took all the way to a Game 7 against Philadelphia, had to win it at the buzzer in that fashion, and really a lot of those games, obviously on the shoulders of Kawhi Leonard scoring, but was also on the shoulders of Marc Gasol's ability to defend Joel Embiid, who was a very legitimate threat when you put him with the likes of the shooters like JJ Redick and what Jimmy Butler was able to do on that team. They were a much scarier team last season than this year in the playoffs, and Marc Gasol was one of the big reasons that they were able to get past that series, especially when you have guys that really struggled against their size, like Fred VanVleet and some of the smaller guards. So that title run was a big part of Marc Gasol, and you talk about assists, you talk about his ability to really bring more out of the offense, Ben. We lost about 3 points per game at the center position, but he was shooting about 44% from three. We would have liked to see him shoot at a higher clip last year, and he was adding from 1 assist per game roundabouts with Jonas Valanciunas to about, I think, 4 or 5 with Marc Gasol. So not really doing it, I guess, as much on the box score necessarily on the scoring, but when you have a guy like Kawhi Leonard, the better complement is a guy like Marc Gasol who's able to create plays off of off-ball movement, making the timely passes. So this guy, he was fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. And, people might only remember this season and stuff, and he was still pretty solid this season outside of the Celtics series, but truly, you got to give credit to Marc Gasol, a beast for the Toronto Raptors. Raptors legend when you go look at it, a guy that wins a championship, your starting center. You gotta have a lot of love for that guy. So shout out Marc Gasol, wish him the best for his future career and playing in Europe, and that's probably definitely a smart move by him, especially being closer to his family or having his family over there in his home, especially during 2020 and the year, the uncertainty surrounding the NBA, and being home is probably a better situation for Marc Gasol. But Ryker, what does this mean for the Toronto Raptors? Because obviously, Gasol's the starting center, and we've sort of discussed this a little bit on the past podcasts, but now that Marc Gasol is officially gone, there's a hole to fill in the front court for the Raptors, Ryker.
There absolutely is, Ben, and I think it's reasonable to say the Raptors are not going to fill in that void of somebody who can pass as well as Marc Gasol. But I think what you're looking for either two things, Ben, and this is what we're going to break down, or I guess technically three things. Do you let your development sort of come up through the ranks? Do you give more time to guys like Chris Boucher? Do you allow more run in that small ball-esque lineup where you're playing OG at the 5 and not really look to bring in anybody else at that backup center position, assuming you bring Serge Ibaka up into the starting lineup? Or do you look to somewhat replace Marc Gasol, but maybe towards a more traditional role back into the likes of what Jonas Valanciunas was able to bring, a guy that can maybe rebound a little bit better, maybe who's a little more athletic, a little more solid in the paint on defense, rather than just a good positioning guy. There is a couple of ways that the Toronto Raptors can look at it, given there is a lot of centers coming up in free agency, Ben, that I think could be relatively cheap.
That's 1,000% sure, Ryker. And just to build off that, there are thousands of sort of scenarios being thrown around about the Toronto Raptors. A lot of things that could honestly make up a whole video for us to talk about potential situations. We'll run through a few in this one here, but I think a lot of these could make for their own sort of segments at their own. I know the most the most wild one, so to speak, is people. I think we've had 3 or 4 or 5 DMs, Ryker, of people asking us if the Raptors are capable of just trading for Joel Embiid. I won't get into that here, but that's some of the wild stuff that's going around. But Bismack Biyombo is another name being thrown around to potentially be the backup center. Obviously running small ball with OG there if you want to just have Serge as the one center. Chris Boucher potentially filling that void of Marc Gasol. All those questions are being thrown out there. Miles Turner, we just made a video on Victor Oladipo requesting out of Indiana. Miles Turner quietly also did the same for the Pacers. So he's another name, a big man that can shoot threes, is pretty athletic, pretty mobile, and playing behind Domantas Sabonis right now. So that's another name that we could potentially trade for, and that's on the table as of now. So Ryker, which one of those specifically really catches your eye? What would you, obviously, I think you and I have learned to have complete faith in Masai, but which one of those sort of rumors really, really captures your eye? And we also have a draft pick this year, too, in the first round, which it seems like we never do. Our last first-round pick was OG Anunoby, I feel like, and that was ages ago.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. And I'll tell you this, and you're absolutely right that we are going to have to break this down in a series of videos because really that's the biggest gap now going into next season is that backup big position. Again, this is assuming the Raptors want to and are successful in re-signing Serge Ibaka, and then assuming that we're going to rely on him being the starting center rather than coming off the bench. But I like that. I like him coming off the bench. We also both agreed that we would both like to see him back for next season. I would say my personal preference at the moment would be to play Chris Boucher more off the bench, allow him to actually develop and see what he's capable of doing at that 4 or 5 position, and to play through the small ball lineup for more amount of minutes throughout the regular season, especially given its effectiveness and being able to defend the perimeter that we saw against the Boston Celtics in the playoffs, Ben. But if we're looking specifically at bringing on a guy, the kind of rumors that I like, I don't know if you mentioned it, but I seen a couple of comments we know how many free agent bigs there are: Whiteside, Drummond player option, Biyombo, Thompson. All those guys are $15, $20 million contracts right now. I like the looks of the cheaper guys. Myers Leonard, I don't know if he'll stay on the Heat, but Aaron Baines. His name. Oh. Yep, but Aaron Baines specifically, his name was floated out a little bit in the comment section. And if we're talking about just replacing a big with a big, to me, that's the guy that there's a lot of promise around. And I know that he'd be the exact opposite of going small, and he'd be the opposite of being a stretch big. But just as a serviceable backup, that's where my brain goes, Ben.
Aaron, so you're saying Aaron Baines or Myers Leonard, or just Aaron Baines?
Yeah, Aaron Baines or Myers Leonard.
Because I completely agree with you on the Aaron Baines point, because you brought up, obviously, he's a gritty defender. He's played for those Celtics teams. He was a big help for the Phoenix Suns when he went down there. He's really been just a solid guy wherever he goes. The one issue you could sort of look at with Baines is he's 33 years old, which a lot of people don't really realize. But, Ryker, you bring up how he's not a stretch big, but he shot 35% from 3 this year on 4 3 attempts per game. I'd argue that he might be a better three-point shooter now than Marc Gasol was this season. So he can definitely stretch the floor out. You know, he's a great rebounder. He's gritty. He's good on the defensive end. I'd love to see Aaron Baines come in maybe as a backup big, and as you mentioned, being a cheaper option. Because, Ryker, I don't know about you, I'd rather have Aaron Baines on this sort of team than a Hassan Whiteside or even maybe an Andre Drummond. Would you agree with that, or is that a little bit blasphemous? Because he's not nearly the name of one of those guys.
I love that. I love that opinion, Ben, because we see what Serge Ibaka is capable of doing. Plus, you and I talk to death about how the Raptors need to assemble a team that is playoff ready. Because we're gone past the days where we just want to succeed in the regular season. We want to make playoff runs. And any big that is the size of Marc Gasol, regardless of skill, unless the physical stature, like kind of slow and really not able to get out there on 3-point shooters, their minutes are going to be reduced in the playoffs anyways. So you don't want to be paying a guy like that huge money if come playoff time he's going to be a reduced minutes guy. And Aaron Baines, he could be fantastic during the regular season, and he could be really impactful with a small amount of minutes come playoffs in situations or matchups that favor having a big on big battle.
Yeah, and that's the exact point, because you're going to have to play, I guess, a Whiteside and Drummond and those types of guys, even if they're more talented. I think they're lesser on the defensive end, and people will say Hassan Whiteside's a tremendous shot blocker, but his rotations defensively, they've been extremely overrated, and that's been pretty well documented from Miami Heat fans and all those types of people in Portland. So we won't get into that specifically, but the fact that Baines can guard on the defensive end and be one of those bigs that, as you mentioned, could be an Embiid stopper, could help build a wall against Giannis as we needed last season. And, maybe can still, if we end up going against the Celtics again, be a rim protector down low. Obviously, Gasol looked pretty stone-footed in the series against the Celtics in the playoffs, but maybe Baines could be, I guess he's 30. I didn't realize he was 33 years old looking at it now, but I think there's still a few more years where he can still be a strong defender. I don't know. I really like that sort of mention. You also brought up Leonard, not Kawhi Leonard, Myers Leonard, but as nice as he is at 3-point shooting, the Miami Heat have become infinitely better moving him to the bench, and I don't know if I'd want him to sort of be that guy, because you need defensive players at your center position. If they can't be mobile or they don't really have a role in the defensive end, I don't think they're really playable at all in the playoffs. So I think at least Baines would have a specific role against certain teams in the playoffs. I don't really see that happening with Myers Leonard, but feel free to disagree with that.
No, that's a fair point. And my point in bringing him up is his current contract is $9 million. Baines is $5 million, even more favorable if we're looking at keeping that cap space as open as possible with the prospect of bringing in bigger names in next free agency. But I just think, to me, Baines would be above. He'd be a level above Myers-Leonard, but Myers-Leonard would be above a level like Biyombo, who's getting paid $17 million, or Whiteside and Drummond, like you said, is very well documented their shortcomings, and they really are the true traditional big that they can't stretch the floor as much, or they have like glaring shortcomings on the defensive end, and both of which would be pretty important because the Raptors, they tend to rely on basically 50% allocation of minutes with their starting center and their center coming off the bench, or at least that's what happened when you have JV and Serge Ibaka when they decide to split them up, and then Marc Gasol and Ibaka. It seems to work when you just play them equal minutes so you don't tire either out, and I suspect that whoever the Raptors decide to go with, even if it's Chris Boucher or even if it's a small ball lineup, you'll still probably see that split between the starter and the bench person playing about 50% of the time, Ben. So they don't need to, they need to be serviceable enough, but I don't think that we don't want to bring in some huge contract guy. I'm just going to keep repeating this. We don't need to bring in a huge contract guy that's going to end up getting benched come playoff time, right?
Yeah, and well, you brought up some of the contracts there. I think I'd love to see Bismack Biyombo on the Raptors, but I think obviously he's getting paid big time for the Hornets this year, but I don't see him making much over the minimum on any team he goes to next season, just with how the league is gone in terms of shooting and all that. And I think we could definitely get Biz on a bargain. But I think the more interesting question is, Riker, because we threw out a few names earlier about, the small ball lineups, and I think we could save those for a full video. The Embiid one, I think a lot of people have been asking for, so we'll probably make that at some point. But these smaller names, but Andre Drummond, Hassan Whiteside, obviously 5 years ago, those are the ideal centers. Those were guys getting max contracts, like the Greg Monroe types. He had a max contract, and now he got waived by the Raptors last season. Obviously, those guys still have a role in this league, right? Andre Drummond was leading the league in rebounds and stuff, but do you think there's going to be teams out there paying them big money to bring them in, Riker? Or do you think those guys will end up being players that will be bargains now this season and the coming years?
Yeah, you raise a tremendous point, Ben, but I will counter this argument with saying that while the league is shifting to having more, the league is becoming mobile stretch bigs. That would be your best case scenario, and even it would be like putting Jason Tatum at the 5. That's what every team would dream of being able to do, to have the Celtics lineup, even though they just lost obviously against the Miami Heat. Or maybe less of a stretch would be to have a guy like Bam Adebayo. That sort of size and athleticism. But you're absolutely right that the league is just shifting away from the guys that are the lumbering big men like Hassan Whiteside, like Andre Drummond. And I think there definitely will be a hit to their market value, and we'll see it go down to some extent, if not significantly, from what they're getting paid this season. Bismack Biyombo especially. I can't imagine anybody paying him more than $10 million. But the thing is, there's just not enough guys that are what the league wants yet that you can say, I'm not going to pay a big, I don't want to have them around. There's nobody else to sort of fill that role yet. So you're still going to want to pay so you can have guys at that 5 position. But as there's more players that come up at that 6'7" to 6'10" frame that can actually shoot and are decent enough on defense, that's when you'll see these lumbering bigs get fully pushed out of the league. That's my thought.
Yeah, and I'm not even saying fully pushed out, but signing on these smaller contracts, because the Monroes, the Drummonds, the Hassan Whitesides, they had big money a few years back, and they're coming to the end of those deals. So I don't even know if Drummond's going to turn down his player option despite playing in Cleveland and all that sort of stuff. But it's definitely going to be an interesting thing, and who knows, maybe that's coming faster than we all expect, and these guys aren't going to make much more than 10, 12 million for certain teams, maybe even 5. We don't really know what their market value is right now. It's such a weird time in the NBA if you're a big lumbering center that once was the highest in demand position, but we'll see what happens with that. And I guess the final question, because there's 2 names that have sort of been brought up, persisted in this podcast, Baines and Biyombo, because those are guys we think we can get on pretty cheap contracts. But with Baines' season last year, Riker, I want to pose a question to you. What would you rather? Would you rather have Bismack Biyombo make his return to the Toronto Raptors next season after coming off a career high in points, averaging 7.4 points per game for the Hornets, 6 rebounds. He had a really solid year for the Hornets last year. And, having him come in on like a minimum contract, because I don't see him getting much more than that, even though he got paid big time by the Orlando Magic. Or would you rather see Baines come in on maybe an $8-9 million contract next season with his added 3-point shooting ability and, a little bit more finesse around in terms of scoring? Averaged 13 points per game last season.
I would rather see Baines come in at $8-9 million because we both agreed you can pay anybody anything you want basically if it's a short enough contract, if it's on a 1 year, because as long as that cap space is available for the following free agency, and you're bringing in guys that are going to put the Toronto Raptors in a position where they can still compete in the East, then I think that would be the ultimate goal there. And Aaron Baines, to me, both on paper and from what I see and watching him play, obviously watch him play a lot less when he was on the Suns than when he was on the Boston Celtics, but I think he could provide a lot more to what the Raptors do in terms of what they would want from a serviceable backup big than what Bismack Biyombo would be able to do. I know he had that fun sort of season with the Toronto Raptors, but the chemistry, the composure of the team at that year was just so much different than what it is now, than what the way they're constructed, Ben.
So you're telling me you don't want to bring back our starting center for our first ever Eastern Conference Finals appearance, Ryker, on the minimum?
Dude, I had the hot take. I wouldn't even bring back DeMar DeRozan on a minimum if you remember that podcast. So this not bringing back Bismack Biyombo is not a stretch.
I think it's a tough question. I think rationally, just the fact that Baines can shoot threes, I'd have to lean in that direction. But my irrational Raptors fandom brain, I want big business back in the six. I want him to be able to finger wag at LeBron James in the NBA Finals, coming in, just completely setting playoff records after averaging 4 points per game during the regular season. That's what I want to see next season for the Toronto Raptors. It'd be a fun little storyline, but let us know what you guys think. What direction do you think the Raptors should go in? What players do you think we should sort of talk about on upcoming podcasts? Because this is definitely a hole the Raptors need to fill, and we're going to be covering all news surrounding the Raptors. So let us know in the comment section below. You're the best to make this far. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all that cool stuff. Ryker, any last words?
I forgot to say at the beginning, Ben, we're losing Marc Gasol, a.k.a. the Big Burrito. Cheers.